I retired about 2 years ago. It was a fairly stressful job, being in payroll. People will tell you all the things that you've done wrong, and not so much the things that you do right.
I'm basically a management consultant and specialise in working with small companies. I enjoy the work and I see there's some new ideas and new challenges ahead, but I'm slowing down. I'm trying to work less time and the time is more flexible. You know, I can take days off when I feel like it and we can do things together.
I think Ray would have got bored myself because he's always been very busy, and I mean, I look after the house a lot, so that sort of fills up a lot of my time, but I wonder if Ray might have got bored if he had have retired at the same time as me.
I think it might have been a bit difficult. As Marg said, if I'd retired and then I don't know that I would have been able to fill the time fully.
I didn't sail before I met Ray. I met Ray when I was about 20 and we started sailing a small boat together.
My father used to sail, or my parents used to sail, and I guess I've just followed in their footsteps. When I was a teenager, I bought my own boat and then kept changing boats until now. It's different to a lot of sports. It's not a sport that you sort of sit and watch. You enjoy it. With the boat we've got now, it's accommodation. So it's like a little unit that you can take anywhere you like. And it's a little bit different to, say, going for a drive in that, you know, where you're leaving from is nice. The going part of it, the sailing part, is nice. And when you get there, it's nice.
With Ray and I, because we've had sailing in common, this is something we've done throughout our whole life. When we've come to retirement, we have had an interest that you can continue. If you don't have many interests before you retire, I possibly think you might be a bit lost.
In telling her story, Margaret Clark said something quite important about retirement. She said, if you don't have any interests, you might be a bit lost. That's true individually, but couples also need to have interests they share.
Well, they certainly have a joint interest in their sailing. And that's significant that they've developed this interest over the years. It's part of their lives and part of their relationship, and was well before their retirement.
In this episode, we're focusing on relationships. We're looking at how couples can strengthen their relationships as they prepare to retire.
This is an important topic every couple needs to talk about before they sail into their retirement.
You grow and keep the connection by purposefully doing things that feeds the connection. John Gottman, one of the experts in research on what makes marriages actually survive and thrive, talks about having relationships in positive sentiment override. What he means by that is putting deposits in the bank and doing that regularly. Because when that relationship is in positive sentiment override, you can almost get away with murder with your partner. Do all sorts of things and your partner just sighs and goes, oh, well, I love him anyway. Yeah, he's wonderful. He's just being a pain right now, but that's okay. But if there's nothing in the bank, then you know what it's like. If you write out a check and the bank account is empty, the check bounces and all sorts of fees end up on your account. So if you have good stuff in the bank, then when you hit little bumps in the road or little misunderstandings, there's something there that will help you get past them a lot more quickly and a lot easier. I think the second thing is if people continue to dream and plan together, then they realise that there are common goals that they still have. There's still things they want to achieve together. There's still things that they want to enjoy together in retirement, and I think that's so important.
I think couples preparing for retirement really need to have the communication factor going pretty early on, and also saying, well, are you going to retire? What are you going to be doing in retirement? And what's their concept of retirement? Because they may have very different ideas of what retirement is and how life is going to be. One person might say, well, I've got a lot of leisure involved in my mind, or I've got a lot of volunteering involved. Or the other person say, well, no, I actually thought I'd go back to work for a little while. So you need to have the conversation so you sort of got some common ground.
Being part of a couple adds to the complication of retirement, because it's not just about you, it's about us. This calls for negotiation and working together. And this can be a challenge, but and part of the challenge is that sometimes you're together every day, all day. A good relationship has support and understanding for each other. That's the ideal. And now that doesn't mean you don't have disagreements. I mean, that will happen, but it's how you work them out. That's the challenge. But the good thing about retirement is you have the time to work on the relationship, make it something quite beautiful. And that is a good way to go. It's complicated, but it can be very rewarding.
Both parties need to be equally involved in all aspects of the retirement plan, including finances. And the main reason that is because if one of the parties gets sick, you want the other party to fully understand what was intended and the implications of any investments or strategies that they'd previously agreed to. So I think getting involved is important. I do think that it's important to sit down regularly and continue to plan in retirement. It's not just a one-off event. You've got to continue to set goals together during retirement.
Talking about your expectations of what you want, defining what your own space is going to be. You might even want to have some sort of understanding or agreement about, your friendship network. Sometimes you want your own friends and sometimes you want our friends, So having your space, your friendships, your routines, your expectations, all of those things talked about and clarified, because they're the things that end up causing the most amount of relational friction.
There are some sad statistics about the divorce rate among the 50-plus age group. In the US, for instance, in the past 2 decades, the divorce rate has increased by 50%. In Australia, same time, the divorce rate has increased by 25%. And in the United Kingdom, it's the fastest growing divorce rate. Now, it's not the area of greatest divorce, that's for the 30s and 40-year-olds, but it's troubling to see these statistics. And one of the other troubling statistics is that 40% of people of all ages who divorce, after 5 years, they wish they hadn't. They wish they'd just seen what was coming and worked on it. That 40% statistic is a signal that it's worth working on.
What some couples do, I think, is they look at each other at the breakfast table, first day of retirement, and go, who on earth are you? Because the person has become a stranger. They have lived parallel lives with no connections across the parallels. And while they've lived in the same house and they've roughly had the same goals, there's been no connection across those parallel lines. And now there's nothing left, and they realise that their marriage is actually a corpse. There's no life in it, and that's really, really sad.
The couple have been so preoccupied in their work world that now they have leisure time, and suddenly they're confronted with the reality, I don't know this man. I don't know this woman. We're strangers. And sadly, rather than working on the relationship and rekindling the fire of romance and passion, they separate.
I think a gain can be that there's less conflict if it is a highly conflictual relationship. If it is an abusive relationship, obviously then the person is safer emotionally or physically if the relationship ends. The losses, I think, are quite huge, and people often go, well, we haven't been close for years, so I don't think divorce is a big deal. I would argue divorce is always a big deal, because you're not just losing the person, you're losing the state of being married. So there's 2 things to grieve in every divorce. There's the loss of the person, which may or may not be a big deal, but there's also the loss of being married and everything that goes with that. Of course, you may lose financially, and there may be struggles in dealing with the children or the grandchildren or keeping those relationships, because invariably people take sides. It's just human nature that they decide one person is more guilty than the other, and they may choose to have limited contact or no contact from the person that they deem to be more guilty. So there's a heck of a lot at stake and a lot of reasons to work fairly hard to make sure that when you get to retirement, that there's something solid there that's going to see you through.
Separation is always traumatic. Even if there's violence and abuse, that there's been an intimate attachment and then it's disrupted and broken, it is always highly traumatic, even though for many it's a sense of relief. But the major thing for retirement couples who are going through a separation is finance. At the latter part of your life where your income potential is diminishing, there's always a setback financially in divorce.
You know, one of the biggest issues is the loss of companionship that I think occurs when a partner is lost. So my sense is that, you know, there are a few things that one ought to at least be aware of or avoid, and the first thing is don't rush into another relationship. It's really important in a situation of major loss to be able to acknowledge the loss, the impact that it's had on you personally, and give yourself time to grieve and get over that. Because when you jump into another relationship, you're now dealing with the issues of that relationship, and a lot of the stuff that has to do with grief and loss is put on hold, so to speak. But it will resurface in the relationship. So it's important, I think, not to hurry, but to work through your grieving process and to be able to acknowledge, and particularly in this situation with divorce, to be able to acknowledge what went wrong, what part you need to address in that breakdown or separation, and to be able to be sure that you've resolved all of that as you move into a new relationship. There's a great reluctance on the part of people to kind of, spill their story out to somebody else. And seeking help is probably, in the minds of a lot of people, an admission of failure. So one's not sort of in a hurry to do that. But I would say that it's a sign of strength to be able to recognise if there's some things that are not working, that are troubling you, and you don't know what to do or how to resolve them. Find somebody that you trust who has the skill of dealing with relationship issues, family dynamics, someone who's trained in that area who can perhaps help you, step you through the sort of issues that you might need to address, deal with. Sometimes, just talking to a friend who is a good listener can help you to objectify some of your concerns, and that might just give you a window to move forward.
Relationship breakdown is always a big deal, a tragedy, in fact, and more so at the time of retirement when there could be the free time to work on strengthening the relationship.
I guess this is one of those times when people think, if only things were different, if only we'd seen that coming, if only we'd worked harder on our relationship. Hopefully it is something that can be worked on. Perhaps it could start with a question to your partner. How do you think we're doing?
And what would be helpful is a plan to work on together for retirement and in retirement.
The issues for couple in retirement, well, there's quite a few. Some people call it the RSS syndrome, which is retired spouse syndrome, but I think that's a bit of a joke because most people seem to, do well in terms of adapting to retirement quite well. But I think that the important thing is to realise that you've both got to be doing something, and often doing something outside the home, and having separate and joint interests and separate and joint friends is really important.
Couples, when they retire, should talk about what sort of life and expectation they want in their retirement years. They shouldn't fly on automatic pilot. It's such a transition, it's such a change from what they've historically been doing, that they need to talk about it openly, authentically. They need to establish a new set of expectations, particularly if they've really been absorbed in their work.
There are three things I would probably suggest. One is how they deal with change, and change within themselves and within the relationship, and how to understand and cope with each other's changing health issues. So what the sort of changes that I would see around experiencing and understanding each other's journey in retirement would be around, say, the loss of income, the loss of status and identity when you stop work and you begin to wonder, so what am I now? Where do I fit? Who am I? Whatever. A lack of purpose, a lack of connectivity, maybe a loss of self-esteem, because often you get a lot of esteem from your work and from the people around you, and a loss of social support if you've moved away or whatever, or just the lack of social support that you have because a lot of your friends may have been involved with your workplace. On a relationship level, because we're now 24/7 in the same space, there are issues about, things like in the past that have created issues that we've kind of blown off as not being, well, we don't have time for that now. You do have the space where you need to be able to deal with conflict, with difference. Some of your bad habits that might be annoying you might need to address because they're in your face right now. Things like learning to accommodate each other's desires and needs. You might have different aspirations for what you want to do. So being able to work out all those sort of nuances in your relationship are big issues in retirement.
Anyone who's part of a couple knows that relationships are complex. There will be disagreements, there will be tension at times, and there will be issues to face. That's just life.
The big message is that there are ways of handling it, and it's worth the effort to make it happen.
I think when couples retire at different times, it can be difficult for the one that's retired the first, because they may actually have their own routine, their own interests. They've actually worked out their routine, and having someone else come in, to so-called upset it, can be difficult. Not everyone, of course, is like that, but making sure that you both have breathing space is really, really important.
In general, we do find that women's retirement dates tend to follow a male partner's. That's just a general trend that's been observed. So women tend to retire, 5 years younger, because that's the average difference between male and female partners in general. So there's that. But there are issues where a lot of women have gone back to work after their children have left home, and they're hitting their straps. In their late 50s, early 60s, they're really gaining momentum, and their partner might be in a position where they're ready to retire. So this can create a bit of resentment in a way, if that, going back to that conditions of exit about retirement, and not feeling like they can choose their retirement time. So that can be a bit of a cause of resentment. The other thing that happens too, though, is that for the person who continues to work when the other party's retired, there can also be resentment there, because they're seeing that the other partner's having a nice, comfortable life and doesn't need to get up early or meet deadlines as much anymore. So there can be resentment there on both parts if they don't continue to communicate and make sure that they're on the same page and working or retiring for the right reasons.
The vast majority of couples don't retire together, and that was well illustrated in the story of Marg and Ray Clark and the sailing couple. She's retired, he hasn't, but he's cutting back on work toward retirement. The statistics in the United States are that 20%, only 20% of couples retire together. And I think that's probably how it works around the world.
When a couple do retire at different times, I mean, I think there is a real issue that they can be on a different pathway. And so they really need to discuss their expectations at that moment and then about how it's going to be when the second person retires. But right at the moment, they've got to deal with, you know. And I remember when my wife retired, people would ask her, you know, so what are you doing with yourself? And I expected her to say, I'm just sitting at home staring at the wall. But she said, I'm having fun. And of course there was a great sort of bewilderment on people's faces. But when I heard that, I thought to myself, I'm still working, she's having fun, so what's wrong with me? So I decided that maybe I'd join her. And just those few months in which there was a difference, I mean, you know, trying to just work out how life would be was an important thing.
In a good relationship, partners impact each other. This can help when making decisions to retire.
And because you can take control of your life, the pressure can come off when you retire. You can enjoy life more.
Exactly.
It's true that ageing can affect a couple's sex life. I think for older men there are the issues, you know, of dysfunction that might occur for them, which is related maybe to diabetes, heart condition, high blood pressure, stuff like that. And for women, the lower libido, which may occur around menopause and so on, can create anxiety and lower desire, lower self-esteem and so on. So these are issues that are likely to impact the couple in retirement and issues that need to be worked through and dealt with. I think most couples, you know, if they have a good relationship, are able to gracefully work through some of these sorts of issues and come to the place where they understand each other and each other's needs and are able to continue to mature their relationship.
Sex continues in retirement. With baby boomers, we're a lot more transparent, we're a lot more open, we've grown up in a more liberalised culture, and so sex is no longer the taboo that it was for the retirees' parents and grandparents, and that's a good thing. It's more open and more able to be discussed. And there will be sexual adjustments, particularly as health vitality maybe diminishes. The best thing for a sex life is to keep healthy. And not only keep healthy, but bring the spark of romance.
Sex is a natural and healthy part of any couple's retirement, and it's important. But as people age, there can be problems with sexual functioning. It was interesting, as I was researching for my book, I talked to sex therapist Bettina Arndt. And after talking to her for a while, I asked her this question: what's the most difficult problem people have in their sexuality? Her answer really surprised me. She talked about it like this. She said, it's like the big elephant in the room that no couple wants to talk about. And I was quite surprised at that, because baby boomers, they're the group retiring now, I mean, they opened up sexuality and sex back in the 60s, 70s, and yet there's difficulty in talking about it one-on-one. That was fascinating. And so what she said is couples must talk about sex. That is the biggest problem.
Well, it's true, some couples do find it very hard to talk about sex. In fact, I'm amazed in my experience of talking with people on this subject that There's not much dialogue that goes on at all, even through the years of marriage. So I think that, you know, I mean, it sounds obvious, right, to say talk, and talk about this.
Retirement brings changes to a couple's relationship, as does ageing. And we must remember that normally both those things come together. What can help is being there for each other and planning together to build the relationship at this time of life.
Even if they aren't retiring together, a change comes when the first of the couple retires. This calls for understanding from both of them. It will be a challenge in many ways.
And when both are retired, there's adjusting to the 24/7 together thing. It can get complicated. It calls for understanding and patience. It calls for a strong relationship based on mutual respect and love.
One couple I was talking to about this, you know, were basically looking at each other across the table saying, you know, what are your hobbies again? And it's just because they've been so disconnected from each other that they sort of need to use retirement as an opportunity to reconnect. So I do think that that will be one of the major issues going forward in terms of managing the transition and where people will need the greatest support.
The sort of things that keep a marriage, you know, growing, fresh, alive, is a sense of connection, a sense of closeness, and a sense of being able to deal with difference and conflict. So, you know, what I would sense is that for a couple to keep those sort of things alive, they need to be working at and increasing their connectivity, maybe developing their emotional IQ, in that they're able to connect emotionally, to be themselves, to know how to be relaxed about themselves, because that's what they bring to the relationship. And if they've got issues that create them, for them an environment where they can't be themselves, then obviously that becomes an issue. So working on some of your own issues and ghosts of the past can be very helpful for the marriage relationship. And what it does is it creates a sense of emotional safety. And that's what marriage is about, the connection, the emotional safety. And I think that if you do get into trouble, it's important to be able to ask for help and to reach out beyond the relationship to sort of deal with your demons and get the issues resolved so that your marriage can develop and grow.
There's no doubt that retirement brings a dramatic change in life. And for couples, it may not be easy to adjust.
This may even be a time of getting to know each other again. After being busy with your separate lives, it can take time to adapt to the new situation. Hopefully you've gained some insights about what you can do to help prepare yourselves as a couple for a great retirement together. It really is worth the effort.
And we think it'll be worth the effort to tune into our next episode about the importance of staying connected with family and friends in retirement. I hope you can join us there.